So first of all, let's understand what is a dimension. Dimension comes from the Latin di, which is two, means two, di, and mention, that is to measure, okay, measure things. So dimension is to measure something from 2 points of view, okay? That's a dimension. So from the observer and the observed, okay, that's a dimension. We usually make the mistake of taking a dimension as a dimensional plane or a dimensional level. A dimension is not a place, it's the measurement of a place. A dimension is not a place where you can go or from where you can come from. A dimension is the different perspectives of one place, of one being, or one object. So the thing that makes us know in which dimension we live in is when we can understand from where and how can we measure that thing. So here we have a sphere. In a sphere, we have one dimension, which is this line here. We have a second dimension here. So we have here 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions. In our dimension, the third dimension, we will call this height, width, and depth. So why we are in the third dimension? Because simply we have a height, a width, and a depth. So as you see here, the dimensions are not about spiritual levels or stuff like that. A dimension is basically the measurement of a reality of an object. Now, as you see, a dimension is a measurement of something. It's not a level of different things. So every object can be measured in 1 dimension, in 2 dimensions, in 3 dimensions, in 4 dimensions, which means that everything that is measurable has different dimensions. And because the universe is something you can measure, this means that the whole universe has many dimensions. And that's why we are multidimensional beings. But not because the humans are multidimensional, because the universe itself is multidimensional. So what this means? That the other beings that are in different dimensions, that we think of them that are in other dimensions, they are not separate things from us. All the beings in the universe in different dimensions are just us being perceived from different dimensions. But it's only one. We are always in all the dimensions, but this one here is only seen and expressed in these 3. So this is what brings us to the first dimension. The first dimension is the acknowledging that the dot, the only reality that exists, is basically one only spot with 2 hemispheres called the alpha and the omega. So the alpha is the spot where everything emerges, and the omega is where everything ends. So what the alpha has to do in order to connect with the omega? It has to spin as much as possible in order to create an axis to communicate the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. So as faster it spins, it can show both sides in one place. So it doesn't matter how, if I spin faster and faster and faster my hand, it doesn't matter when I show the palm of my face, you will be also watching the back part. So in this constant spinning is how the unity is able to perceive the different parts of itself, the different dimensions. So this is why the photons, the particles, the tiniest particles of the universe, they are just showing us an illusion. The illusion that everything is just the perception of one only spot spinning really fast. This is why everything is I am. The truth is that all of us, all of it is just an illusion of one spot moving really fast. And the moment in which the people that are living in that house recognize that they don't exist, that we are just a projection of a dot, and we become the dot, we become the dreamers. And when we become dreamers is when we also become creators. The constant spinning is the dreamer willing to live its dream. So what is the energy that moves this? Is the infinite energy that creates the spinning. And we humans call this energy as love. So love is the infinite energy that allows the dreamer to create its dream, to live its dream. So the first dimension is not something that is outside and there are beings living there. The first dimension is the concept of understanding that we are all one, that we are dreamers enjoying the ability to live the dream, the ability to live, to experience it, and feel in love by it. And when we do so, we are connected to the essence and the basis of the first dimension. A dot or a line is what describes the first dimension. So the first dimension can be seen like this, like a dot or a line, because basically this dot is the beginning or the end of one line. So if you put this line in front like this, you will see a dot. So basically you can see it this way. So one extreme of the first dimension is the alpha and the other extreme is the omega. So if we just take one dot, we will see this here, cutting the hemisphere, having alpha in one side and the omega in the other side. Okay, so that would be the kind of the two positive and negative of the first dimension. If this is the first dimension, if this here is the first dimension, the second dimension will be this. So this line here is the first dimension, but then the second dimension will be the forms, the shapes, will be the figures of the things, is the planification of the things. Okay, so that here would be a square, which is the basis of other creations after that. And then we have the third dimension, which will be seen in this way. So the third dimension, what is going to be? The depth. So here we have height. How do you write this? Height. Height. Okay. Height.
Feet. Height.
Okay. So we can say that, for example, the first dimension will be the height. The second dimension will be the weight, and the third dimension will be the depth. Remember, as I explained the first day of Pisces, the dimensions are not different places that you can find separated, like 1, 2, and 3 separated from each other. The dimensions are only one thing that are measured from different point of views. Okay, so this is 3 dimensions. 1 dimension here, 2 dimensions here, 3 dimensions there. They are not places, they are measures. So as we have here the first dimension and the second dimension, they are measurements of something that exists. But until the depth doesn't exist, there is no object, there is only measurement. So depth, it's also the word for profound. Okay, is the same word. So profound comes from the Latin going into the depth, going into the deepest part. That's the meaning. So how do we get the depth? We get it by the fractalization of the second dimension. When the second dimension fractalizes itself, we get the depth. Sometimes many of us in school had experience a teacher of drawing that teach you how to make the depth in a drawing. I don't know in English the name, but it's
Vanishing point.
Vanishing point. Okay, thank you. The vanishing point of a drawing. Okay, so it's useful to talk about the perspective of the things. So the vanishing point basically would be the fractalization of the second dimension. The vanish point, it can be in the center or whatever. We can put it here in the middle of this place. What I'm going to do to connect the perspectives is to connect this dot with the vertices of the square. And now what I'm going to do is to fractalize the cube to go towards the place, the dot. Do you have the image? Suddenly a cube became like a portal. You can put a little bit of shadow. Okay. So the only thing that we just did was to fractalize the structure of a square towards the dot. So the first dimension and the second dimension got united to create the third dimension. And this is the way in which you can draw something with depth, with something that is profound. So drawing class. So from where the third dimension comes from an imaginary illusion. It's an optic illusion. So you have here one fractal, another one here, another one here, another one, and bigger. Okay. So here with this auric structure, we can also see how the fractals starts to make this illusion, this idea of depth in the reality, creating the third dimension. So we can create more and more and more, and this will give us an idea of depth. Por fractalidad, by fractalization. So what this is saying to us is that everything that creates by fractalization is an illusion. Let's go back to the most easier fractal of all. In the first dimension, we have one pole, one axis in positive and negative, and we add another two to create in the second dimension the image of a triangle. So to make a fractal, let's make another vanishing point. So let's connect the axis. So now we have a tetrahedron. First dimension, the line. Second dimension, the triangle. Third dimension, the tetrahedron. Okay. So we can create new points of vanishing points. Okay. So we will have again the same structure inside. We can also connect it like this through different vanishing points. So what I just done here is to connect the same dots to expand into a new one. So this is a fractalization. Okay, a fractalization is to create once and again the same structure. Once and again. Okay. A fractalization is a fraction of one whole, of one part. So this here is like a fraction of the whole. That's a fractalization. So it's when you say 2/3, for example. Okay, What do you know that is like this? What do you know like this that has a negative and a positive, and a third one that just appears to give meaning and sense to these other two? Electron, proton, neutron. So mostly the basic structure. The basic structure of what? Of matter. So this one got united, and this one here spins all the time. So we have another trinity that, for example, is 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogen. Water. And we also have this. And the structure here that will shape carbon. So when we start to replicate this structure, we have the base of life, which is the carbon. And here we have water. So as you see, the basis of everything is just positive and negative, connected, positive and negative connected, and they create a figure, and that figure, when it fractalizes, starts to create a shape, a form, depth. So what is matter? Matter is basically an illusion that is fractalized. So the fourth dimension basically is time. So knowing about the fourth dimension being the dimension of time, we have to understand that this dimension is related to the process of things. Not the things, but just the process. Things are objects in the third dimension. So we have the things, the objects in the third dimension, and the process of the things in the fourth dimension. So usually we as humans perceive the time as a line where we are moving through. We are going through a line of time, but it's not like this. So things are not moving through time. Things transform itself through time because of time. So it is the same thing. So this is how we are going to try to understand what is the fourth dimension. So remember, we have the first dimension. The first dimension will be projected in the second dimension. The second dimension will be projected in the third dimension. So you remember that the second dimension, by fractals, it divides itself to create the perspective of the third dimension, the vanishing point. Okay? So this is not describing what is happening. This is just describing the distance. So I will have another cube here. And this cube will be connected to each one of the nodes. Can you see it fine? But we can do this to keep going outside. Creating another one, another cube. So it can be fractalized to the eternity, forever, constantly, within and outside. We can say, for example, that this cube inside is what we call the spirit. This one here, the soul. And this one, the body. So now let's try to do something that is very difficult to understand without movement. As you see, this is like a being, a body with a soul, with a spirit within. But they all are the same. They are not separated. They are just extensions of each one. When I die, what happened when I die? So now, what happens when we die? That this one here opens itself through the nodes, expanding itself and taking place in the outside. So as you see, the body is still there. It didn't disappear. It still exists. But the only thing that happened is that that an internal part expanded in the outside. Now, let's imagine that each cube has an attribute. The spiritual, which is the core, is the essence. Then the soul is the energy, and then the body is the matter. So when the body dies, the energy expands, dissipates, expands, and the core of the essence expands wider outside the energy. So it's like if this image turns completely the opposite, upside down. So it's like now the body is here, the soul is here, and the spirit is here. And somehow the spirit managed to become again the essence, and the body goes out and take place again as the one covering the whole thing. And they create the same again, a new life. But it doesn't get bigger. It is just the same size. It's only that they go out and they transform. So what happened here? The essence, the energy, and the matter, they never finish. They're constant. They are the same thing, and they are eternal in the universe. They are always here. The three of them, the three concepts of the existence, they're constantly there. What is the only thing that really changes is that they transform, that they change the position, the shape. That's the only thing that happens, really. Nobody really dies. Everything is really transforming itself. So what happened is that there's no separation between all the things. It's all the same, but transforming itself constantly. Let's go to the first transformation of the essence, the energy, and the matter that we can understand and explain. So just for you to know, this is only one of the shapes that we can explain in the fourth dimension that we call tesseract. But the tesseract is only a cube in the fourth dimension, because if there would be another structure like a tetrahedron, dodecahedron, the name would be different, okay? Because it's just explaining the cube, the tesseract, okay? So this cube can expand this way and create another one bigger and even much more bigger that comes back and take place over the smaller one. So let's go to the first base of how we are created. So now follow this image, that this cube here starts to open itself, getting wider, getting this square the same size as this square and going out, expanding itself. Do you follow the image? So what is this doing? So if we unite all the vertices of these cubes, we will have a sphere. So this is a cell, and this is another cell. So this here in the center would be the chromosomes. So when the chromosome starts to divide, they replicate themselves, creating a new cell. So what we usually see, like these things like this, is that they divide, they project itself in others, creating a new one. So this is something that is not only happening in the humans, this is happening in the mineral kingdom, in the vegetal kingdom, and the animal kingdom, in all of them. So what is happening here? That the matter, the thing, is going through a process. And this process is dividing in evolution the whole structure. So it's a process through time. For example, in the minerals, we have a salt cube that replicates in another salt cube, and another one, and they start to multiply until they create a salt mountain. In the vegetals and the animal kingdom, we see it like this. So this is describing the process of transformation of matter, which is through time. So as you see, time is not something separate from space, from the things. The time is basically an aspect of the physical object during the transformation. Imagine that this is something that happens constantly in our life. First, we are two cells, but then we become a fetus, then a baby, then a child, then a teenager, an adult, and we keep changing, but not only as growing up. Every day we are changing. Every day, thousands and billions of cells die, and thousands and millions are born again in our body. They are constantly transforming our body. And this means that the time is constantly changing us. Every an amount of time, every, I don't know how much time, the entire cells of our body change completely. The only ones that they are not changing are the neurons, but the rest ones, they all changed. We are not the same body. Okay, remember, spirit, soul, and body. How are they connected one another? By these two lines. So the way in which we are connected is through these nodes that expand one another. What makes you remember these nodes? Chakras. These nodes are basically chakras, but they are organized in a different way. What happens if these chakras are not connected? So all the structure starts to be unbalanced. There's no connection, there's imbalance. So these nodes are opened to anything because they are not aligned. This is what explains why from the fourth dimension there are beings that live through the energy of others, that nourish themselves, and also possessions. Many of the beings that we know from the fourth dimension are called demons, energetical parasites, angels too. We had one third dimension. So remember, we have a third dimension related to the space and the fourth dimension related to the time. So now we have another dimension, which is the fifth dimension, that will be the third and the fourth together united as one. How are we going to see now the sixth dimension? So the way in which we are going to do that is by connecting again, duplicating the structure. So now, a being in the third dimension going through a process of the fourth dimension gets aware of the entire process, and by consciousness realizing how to handle these two, can create a new reality in the sixth dimension. So from this point of view, very cold, we would say that a cube in the third dimension is just an object. Through the fourth dimension is an object that is moving. And this process of an object moving through the time, the unity of both of them is the fifth dimension, the one that holds the structure of this object going through a process. So in the sixth dimension, all this entire process being understood will be changing a little bit to create a new one. So, for example, in the third dimension, I can see a tree. I go in the street, I see a tree. In the fourth dimension, I don't see only a tree. I see the whole history of the tree. Since the seed, when it takes the first leaf, when it takes the roots, when it is growing, then we see the flowers, the fruits, all in one. We can see all of that in the fourth dimension. The reason why we cannot see the whole process of the tree is because we live in the third dimension and we can see only the depth of one thing. So in the third dimension, we can see only one stage of this life of the tree. So we can see the seed, and then we can see how it grows, and then we can see the tree, and so on. But we need a time, we need a process going to all the stages to see all that. So in the third dimension, we see the tree, but in the fourth dimension, we can see all the stages of the tree in one instant. So what I'm going to see in the fifth dimension of this process of the tree, I will see the patterns that hold the tree. I will see the energy that makes the tree happen, exist. In the fifth dimension, I will understand the logics of why a tree exists. So now, how am I going to see the tree in the sixth dimension? I will see the tree as if it is inside a kaleidoscope. I will see the tree like in a kaleidoscope. So the tree suddenly will have very weird shapes, like if it is dividing itself and projecting itself, like in many options. And suddenly, in the kaleidoscope, when I turn the image, the tree starts to turn upside down, and the roots are up, and I start to see like this shape, and they start to replicate once and again until they are smaller and smaller and smaller. So suddenly, it stops being one tree, and it turns out to be many options of that tree. This is what we call the bending and the unbending of time. So here we have these two constants, the constant of time and the constant of space. Why are they called constants? Because constant comes from the Latin word, the entity that stays together all the time. Okay, so that's what it would be, a constant. So time and space are the two constants of the universe. It's always there. So in this constant, we can understand that we have here different crosses that represents different times and different spaces. So what determines the difference of these times and the difference of these spaces? Vibration. According to the level of vibration, you are in a higher place or in a lower place, in a higher time, in a lower time. To a place that is in a high vibration, we will call it up, and a low vibration, we will call it down. So a time in a low vibration will be called past, a time in a high vibration will be called future. In each one of these crosses, we have a merging of these two time and space. So it is a singularity here. So now, all the energy in the universe, when they get together in a constant of time and a constant of space, get together a positive aspect and the negative aspect. What happens when you put a positive and a negative? They will try to find a neutral point, so get together. So this magnetic field will discharge the energy through the positive and absorb the energy through the negative. Because time and space are a constant, so it's not only one positive and one negative, it's a constant of positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. So the energy will move in a spiral way here. So if I have here one positive and one negative, this dot here will start to spin. So this will generate a source of energy. So what this will create is like this turning point, like a key, like if you are adjusting the strings of a guitar. So what happened? As much strength it has, the other weak points will tend to go to this dot here. So this will begin to do like this. You see it? So now this is what we call the bending of time and space. It is curving the lines of time and space. So suddenly the nodes that before were in the crosses will be bending towards these regions here. So this will be like a sun and the stars and the planets moving around, going around a bit. So this makes appear the third dimension. Here we have the first dimension in this line. Then we have the second dimension. And here, with the depth of this movement, the spiral, we create the third dimension. This is how the third dimension appears in the constant of time and space. So matter is not something that moves through time and space. Matter, as you see here, is the entangle of time and space, is a result of all those things together and compressed. And this is what creates the gravity. That's something that was vibrating like ding, 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 starts to vibrate like ding, 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 dong, ding, wom, 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 wom. Gravity. So the strength in which you regulate the scrolling like this is the fourth dimension. So what is the fifth dimension? The angles of observation of one process. So the fifth dimension is basically the observer, which is the angles that are observing the process that they hold. So now to see and understand the sixth dimension, we will have to go backwards, behind this. So now I hope you can understand that this, what I drew here, is like another perspective of what before was in two dimensions. So now I'm trying to draw it in a third dimension. So you can see how the center point that before all the lines were heading to the core is really here because of the gravity, the heaviness. So all these lines that I was drawing here, they are going down there. So this is how you see it in another perspective, okay? So this is the bending of the time. The time is curving itself like this. This is like if you have a bed and you put a weight, a very heavy ball, the other tiny balls around, they will come to that, they will fall down towards the bigger one. So that's the gravity. So now what we have here, that all this space that is holding the weight of this is the fifth dimension. So we have here that time and space, they curve themselves, creating an object. So now let's go into what is happening in the sixth dimension. It's happening the same, but in the opposite side. So what this means, that what is happening here will transform itself and be able to be experienced here. We have a first dimension, we have a fourth dimension, we have a third dimension, we have a fourth dimension, and we have a fifth dimension, which is what is holding the entire picture. So each angle of the whole pattern here is the fifth dimension. So here we have, as I said, first dimension here, second dimension, the third dimension, the depth, the fourth dimension, the bending, which is the time, and the fifth dimension, which is the observation that holds all this that is happening in the grid. So where's the sixth dimension? The sixth dimension is the opposite side, creating the opposite of it. The sixth dimension here would be the one that completes the entire creation, that gives the force of the entire creation. Let's see it more simple now. Simple here. Fifth dimension, sixth dimension. What is doing the sixth dimension? To multiply this structure, this concept of time and space, towards within and towards the outside as many times as possible. So it will be bending time and space towards the depth and towards the outside. So it will replicate the same system. I cannot draw it properly because it's very complex, the design. It would start to expand towards the outside. So this is a sphere. What is a sphere? It's a fractalic expression of a tetrahedron in the 6th dimension. Let's do it with a circle. Why a triangle is the basic shape of the universe? Why not other? Because when you want to shape anything, the first figure is a triangle always. Why is that? Because when you have in the 1st dimension a positive and the negative, these two are willing to get in touch, but they cannot, because this one must bend towards the other one. So it creates the 2nd dimension. Okay, here we have the 2nd dimension. But what happened with the 2nd dimension? That these are not touching. This doesn't have any logics. Okay? So that's why they need a 3rd option to connect them as one. That's why the Trinity is the base of everything. The triangle is the base of all the Platonic solids, so from all the figures and all existence. Okay? So all the cultures in all existence, they talk about the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. And this is what explains the Holy Trinity. It's not the Holy Ghost and the Father and the Son or the Mother. No, this is just an interpretation of this, but this takes all the magics of it, of course. But basically, all the religions are based in this triangle. So how does this triangle to multiply itself? In order to multiply, it needs to add another one. So how it through the square. So it creates the square. So again, it will multiply by in 5 phases. So from the triangle goes to the square, from the square to the pentagon, from the pentagon to the hexagon. So now from this triangle goes to the square, from the square to the pentagon, from the pentagon to the hexagon, and from the hexagon it goes to 8 faces, 8 lines, 10 lines, and it starts to multiply and multiply and multiply more and more and more and more until suddenly you have a circle. So a circle is only in 2 dimensions. So a triangle multiplied by 1,000 creates a circle. But a circle multiplied by thousands creates a sphere. So if a triangle multiplied by thousands will create a circle, a tetrahedron multiplied by thousands will create a sphere. Where they multiply? In the 6th dimension by fractality. So if I am in a triangle willing to find the point of balance, I will have to trace a line from each one of the corners to the center, so I can have a powerful basis of this. So that's what creates the concept of a tetrahedron that, starting to be multiplied, will create the sphere. If this triangle was multiplied by thousands, so that means that there will be thousands of crosses. So in this multiplication of the triangles by thousands, now there is not only 3 that will hold the pattern, there will be billions and thousands of crosses all around. And that will create a point of tension called the core. So if this is a sphere, this will be the core of a sphere. Meaning that the billions of angles of a sphere will be setting its pressure towards the core. As much more pressure, this means that the basis of the matter, the electrons, starts to vibrate faster and faster because of friction and pressure that they are having. So this is why it starts to get hotter inside. When they move faster, they start to heat. So this means that when much pressure a sphere is having, this means much more atmospheres it has, it will create so much pressure that the electrons will create a lot of heat, like in the core of the sun or in the core of the planet of Earth. So as much more energy or much more pressure, the electrons create much more energy. And that's why they starts to expand so much that they create light. So this is why when we see lava, the magma of a volcano pouring out of a mountain, of a volcano, we see light. The rocks, they melt and they produce light. How can a rock produce light? It's because of the pressure and the electrons trying to get out. So they have such heat that they produce energy and light. Okay? So this means that the pressure of a star, of a planet, is so much that creates so much energy inside by the friction that it enlightens. So the core of a sun, the core of a star, the core of a planet is enlightened light. So now we have seen this from the point of view of the third dimension. Let's see it from the point of the sixth dimension. So now from the sixth dimension, this is not just matter. This is options of time and space. So many options, thousands of options of possibilities that they all coexist. So let's say that every time-space line that are holding a reality in the sixth dimension, creating many options, they all set so much pressure to the core of this transformation that inside we have light. This pressure, this fold from here, that in the third dimension we call energy, in the sixth dimension we call it illumination. What is the energy? Is the friction of all the forces of three dimensions. What is illumination? Is the joint of the forces of 6 dimensions. In the third dimension, these 3 directions create 6 points of direction. This one here, 1 and 2. This one here, 1, 2. This one here, 1 and 2. So 6. In order to create energy, we need the 6 directions of the third dimension. Do you remember these 6? Vibration, energy and matter, love, wisdom, and will. The 6 directions. So in the 6th dimension, in order to get enlightenment, illumination, we need to go through 6 dimensions. So the 6 dimensions gives us 12 directions. 12 directions. So now these 12, what are they? Are the attributes, the 12 zodiac signs that we are using. I can, I see, I believe, I use, I create. Okay? The different attributes of me in the 12 zodiac signs. So now, when I get to go through all the path and integrate all the attributes of the self, I can, I see, I know, I believe, I use. When I activate these 12 attributes, I enlighten myself in the center. And that's the moment when you go to the 7th dimension. So what this means is that if you want to enlighten yourself from the 3rd dimension, you will have to integrate all the aspects of all the possibilities of your times and spaces and transcend them as one. So a little bit complicated, but we can do it. This doesn't mean that we cannot do it. We can do it. So the 7th dimension is the path of enlightenment. So in order to get into this energy, you need a lot of pressure. That's why it's so heavy, so complicated to reach it. So now what happened? That it's very difficult and it takes a lot of pressure to get to the core, to the enlightenment. But once you reach there, what happened? That all the forces that are pressing you suddenly disappear, because all the forces together equals 0. So in order to reach the enlightenment of the 7th dimension, I need to go through the process of the pressure of all the timelines and all the spaces. So when I go there, when I do that, when I go straight to the center, to the point, I don't feel much pressure. I don't feel the pressure anymore. I feel free from that. So the 7th dimension is like this light of potential of the entire universe. And this energy is so strong, so hard, that it needs to be released, to be expressed. It's like, for example, in our dimension, Earth, they have a lot of pressure. Earth has a lot of pressure in the core because of the gravity and the atmospheres. It is heavy, so very heavy. So sometimes that energy that is created inside needs to go out to set itself free, and that release of energy is what we experience as earthquake. Okay, the earthquakes are the movement of the crust of the planet because of that release of energy. Okay, so in the 7th dimension happens exactly the same. So it expresses this amount of energy, and it goes out and comes back being reabsorbed by the other side. But remember that this structure has 12 rays. So because this has 7 rays, each one of them will do exactly the same. What this is generating. So take a look in what this is generating. If I keep expanding these patterns, look what is happening. So what you see here is 12 toroids, 12 torus, that they start to multiply by thousands once and again, creating many, many patterns. What is this reminding you, this structure here? This can remind you the constant of time and space that we have been speaking about. Can you see how the grid of time and space appears? So this is the origin of the lines of time and space, the conjunction of all the torus that creates this dimension is the one that holds the grid of time and space, the constant that we call the net. So in each one of the crosses, I will find with one specifically time line and space line. So what they are doing here, they start to bend themselves. They start to bend the lines of time and the line of space. So that's the bending of time and space, the creation of the nodes. Some going right, the other one going left, is exactly as sunflower distributes the seeds, okay, into spirals, one to one side, other one to the other side. So now take a look about to this, that the light of the 7th dimension expanded in the 8th dimension is the one that creates the basis of the constant of time and space that will hold all the other creations, all the other dimensions. So this means that the 8th dimension is the essence of all things, is the one that allows everything to emerge, to exist. Is a dimension that brings logics, constants of time and space. Now let's go into see it from another point of view. From these 12 torus that we just saw in the previous image, now we're going to take only one torus, so 2 only rays. We take the other 10 and we just take only one that we will call positive and negative. Okay, so now see this. From the core of the 7th dimension, the energy is to expand outside in the shape of time, and the time turns into space, and it goes back and creates a new time that goes back and creates a new space, because time starts to expand out. So time expands and matter contracts. So this expansion here makes the feeling of a time called future. This is gravity here, because it starts to contract. Everything that was around starts to contract into only one thing. So this is why this time here will be called as past. And in the middle point, we will find the present. And this here will be called eternity. So now see this. Is the future that expands, and is the future that creates the past. Is the future that designs the past. So the past creates structures, rigid structures, that can be lived, experienced in the present, and from there, from the present, we rewrite the codes to create another future. In the 8th dimension, the first time is future, not the past. In the 8th dimension, the future is the one that designs the past. This is why naturally, in order to know where we go, we have to know from where we come from. The present is the moment where I can use the tools that I have created in order to build a new future. As you see, the lineal tempo, the lineal time is impossible to be lived here. The only moment where you live the lineal time, as we appreciate it now, is here. But the whole rest doesn't have a line. So we have here the eternal, the future, the present, and the past. Do you remember that yesterday we explained that this is like a flower? So if we have the flower in the center, the future will be the perfume, the smell of the flower, the essence that you can perceive, that you can feel. The beings from the future will take from this flower the eternity that we know as nectar. Remember that nectar means death, but those who drank the nectar, like gods, they became immortal. So from this flower, the people from the future takes the nectar and the pollen of the 7th dimension. Remember the bees of consciousness coming here? So what do the consciousness bees do in the present? They experiment creating things with the nectar and the pollen. With these products and experience that they have in the present, what do? The beings from the future, they create the past. What is the past? The structures, the patterns of the reality. And that's the beehive. With all this geometry, hexagons, the beehive. They create that and they create the honey. So now, I have two presents, the present that I live here and the present that I live around here. During my present, I processed all the past. I create the past. And then I had another moment of present where I receive the products of the past. The bees from here, from the past, they bring also the pollen to the flower. So the flower can create many more. So the flower can expand, can create much fruits and blossom in the next spring. So the eighth dimension is talking us about this process, but not only from one being, but for all the billions and thousands and trillions of beings of every molecule, atom of the entire universe. So the difference with the fourth dimension is that the fourth dimension only has one line of time of one being that we experience, but in the eighth dimension is all of them together, the billions and trillions of beings, past, present, and future of all everything that exists is there. This is why to the eighth dimension we usually know it as the registry, the records of all the database of the entire universe, and that's what some of you may call the Akashic records. Akasha in Sanskrit means light. So Akashic records means the records, the registry of all the light. So remember, we have light here in the center, shining. All these are the data of that light. In ancient times, we used to call this the great spider, Manik. Remember that the seventh dimension is irradiating its light towards 12 directions. Remember that each one of them creates a torus, from each one of its directions. So what happened with this torus is that they start to create a circle, as you can see. So it's not only that one torus creates many different, like a three-dimensionality, like this, okay, like three-dimension, like different lines creating a 3D mold of a torus. Is not only like this that appear, but also they multiplied by 12. I mean, 6 torus, okay? We have 6 torus that multiply themselves. So it's like having this torus here, and we multiply it in all directions. So as I said, the torus is like the shape of an apple, and the apple is created by that because once you have one symbol of the infinite, it starts to multiply in 3 dimensions, like all the filaments around creating the shape of an apple. And so in the 8th dimension, what happened is that there are many of these torus interacting each other, so they start to create like this pattern that is not like a flower, is a sphere. So the 8th dimension create this beautiful flower of a sphere that we have here. So what happened here? That this circle that we have here, the crust of the sphere, has many links, crosses, dots, nodes that matches and create these patterns around like the surface of the planet, for example. So now remember that each one of these nodes are the creation of the crossing of 2 lines. One line is the line of time. One in this direction is the line of time. The other one in that direction is the line of space. So in the middle, they create a node that will become matter. And this node is something that we call here and now. Yeah. So this means that each one of these nodes here of the matter will be the conjunction of the constant of time and space living through the pressure of here and now, creating matter. So now remember that these nodes are not just a few here in the sphere, are all around in the sphere. They create the sphere. Because remember that a few videos ago, I explained that a sphere is basically the conjunction of thousands and billions of dots of vertices. Because a sphere is the product of the fractalization of a triangle. So a triangle fractalized thousands and billions of times, it creates a sphere. A circle, then a sphere, okay? They multiply and they create that. So as you see, each cross of time and space is billions of these nodes of matter that create the crust of this sphere. So let's try to remember what we spoke in the third dimension and the sixth dimension. Now, remember, simply, the third dimension. How do we make a figure in the second dimension to become third dimension? We have to find the vanishing point. So we make the vanishing point here and we connect with the vertices. And there we have a tetrahedron. So that's the third dimension, the depth. Okay. So now where do we have the sixth dimension? The sixth dimension will come with the fractalization of the third dimension. So for example, let's fractalize here the third dimension. And what we obtain is a Merkaba. So from the Merkaba, it starts to create many realities. Then you can check again dimension 3 and dimension 6. So now, why I am explaining the 3 and the 6 here? Because in the third dimension, we have here that is the multiplication of the triangle that creates all these vertices that as much they divide, they start to create what? The circumference. It creates the idea of a sphere. As you see here, it kind of starts to create the idea of a sphere. As many multiplications it lives. And what was the sixth dimension? Is the connection and fractalization of all this structure, creating new possibilities, new potentialities of the same pattern, creating many others. Do you remember that in the sixth dimension, each one of the nodes of these possibilities, of this creation, starts to irradiate the energy towards the seventh dimension? So this structure is the one that starts to manifest the idea of the seventh dimension, which is the light. Can you see the depth? So now here we have now a sphere. You see the depth of the sphere? Because the third dimension created the sphere and the sixth dimension is transforming all of them into the core, into the seventh dimension. So now look at this. The same structure that with pressure creates the light is created by the irradiation of the light that they create. So that's why the irradiation of the light of the seventh dimension creates these patterns of the eighth dimension of time and space. This is the paradox of the universe in which the created is the creator. So usually when we, as humans, we try to explain the reality through a line. So first this, second this, third that. But when we reach these dimensions, it's almost impossible. Look at this. It's very complicated to understand what is first and what is next. So the reason of the paradox here, the creator that is that is the creator, emerges from the concept that none of them is real. It's like, what is first, the egg or the chicken? Which one is the first one? The third dimension or the sixth dimension? The seventh dimension or the first dimension? The fifth dimension or the ninth dimension? Which one is the first one? Not even the eighth dimension and the seventh dimension, sixth dimension, fifth dimension, fourth dimension, third dimension, second dimension, and first dimension, all of them, they don't have a process of creation in a linear way, because they are all creating themselves once and again, once and again. So they are projections of each other. That explains that all of them are just a hologram. And the hologram is in the ninth dimension. So what are all the other dimensions that we have been watching until now? Basically, all those dimensions are just concepts, parts that helps us understand the hologram of the ninth dimension. So it's really difficult to explain this with the very human body experience, because we don't have that. The only way in which we can kind of understand this is with the cinema. So basically, when you get to understand the ninth dimension is when you realize that you have been the producer, the writer, the filmer, the one that films, filmmaker, the one that paid the film, the camera guy, all of it, the plot, everything. You are all of that.